I'm Eunice Zehnder-Lai. I'm a board member and executive committee member of the American Swiss Foundation and co-chair of the Programs Committee. Welcome to our second virtual event this year. For those of us who are joining for the first time, let me tell you a little bit about the American Swiss Foundation. ASF is a U.S. incorporated 501c3, and our mission is to connect and engage Swiss and American leaders through programs such as this one, as well as in-person events. We have both Swiss and American representation on the board and the executive committee. We've been around for a long time. Next year, in 2025, we will be celebrating our 80th anniversary. Yet, despite our long history, we are not sitting on our laurels. We are constantly trying to reinvent ourselves to meet the needs of the changing world. For example, exactly a week ago, we had our inaugural leadership summit here in Switzerland, where we had 270 participants listening to different panels filled with experts on subjects ranging from the US elections to energy and climate, to banking crisis and the role of various central banks. Our flagship program, as many of you are aware, is the Young Leaders Conference, where every year we select 25 young leaders from the United States and 25 young leaders from Switzerland to meet in November in Switzerland for a week-long packed program to get to know each other to further our understanding. Since 1990, we've had probably now 34 different young leaders conferences, and we have an alumni community of close to 1,500 people. Today, we've invited 3 members of our most recent class, the class of 2023, to talk about their experience at the Young Leaders Conference. Let me briefly introduce our 3 speakers. First, moderating for us is Charlotte Mueller. Charlotte is the European Chief Economist at Swiss Re. In her role, she leads her team to drive the economic, research, analysis, and forecasting for the European economies. Then we have from the United States, Mayor Quinton Lucas, who was elected in 2019 as the mayor of Kansas City. Before his current role, Mayor Lucas was a faculty member at the University of Kansas Law School and one of the youngest tenured law school professors in the entire United States. We also have Sally Portman, Chief Operating Officer of Tax Strategies, a full-service creative media and digital marketing agency. We are delighted today to have many members of the ASF community with us, as well as friends from our partner, Swiss International Airlines. Let me now pass on to Charlotte to moderate the conversation.
Thank you very much, and hello, everyone. It is a great pleasure to be your moderator today. And as mentioned, the goal for today is to reflect and share firsthand the thoughts and experiences of the latest Young Leaders Conference that took place in November in Switzerland. So we're going to have 2 key parts. The first part, I'm going to try and break the ice and do some rapid fire questions. And then the second part is going to be about some more reflective questions on the topics that were discussed in the conference. So with that, I'm going to do first some quick rapid fire questions where I'm going to ask Mayor Lucas and also Sally to each respond in ideally 1 word or 1 sentence. And the first question I'm going to say is, what was the one thing you thought about when you heard the country Switzerland before visiting? So how did you imagine Switzerland before visiting? Over to Mayor Lucas first.
I thought about skiing.
Great. Sally?
The Swiss brand is strong. Can I say cheese, cows, chocolate watches? More than
Sounds
words,
great.
but a sentence.
Sounds great. The three C's, basically. Then next up, maybe staying on that theme, did the Swiss stereotypes meet your expectations when you did visit last November?
Yes.
Yes,
Mayor Lucas?
everybody was exceedingly kind, and I also got to make some great partners who were like skiing every single weekend during the winter months. So it seemed like it did actually fit with what we were expecting.
Cool. So I assume then if you had the choice to go back to Switzerland to do some holidays, Mayor Lucas, it would be for some skiing.
I am tempted to do that, but like hiking, the mountains are wonderful. My part of the country is the Midwest, and so it is nothing but flat. So really, any time of year, I think Switzerland makes for a fantastic trip for me and my family.
And what about you, Sally? If you went back to Switzerland for holidays, would you go for hiking or skiing?
I think I'd have to pick skiing. As an East Coaster, we have some mountains, nothing like you have in Switzerland. I think I might try to, I don't know, loop in Janine and her synchronized ski team for some lessons or get some new experiences in the winter time.
Cool. And Sally, you also mentioned the three C's, so chocolate, cheese, and clocks. Between chocolate and cheese, what would you say is your number one preference?
I'll pick cheese any day. I think, fondue, raclette, bring it on.
And
Mayor Lucas, cheese or chocolate?
Oh my God, that is so tough. I think I would go with cheese, though. My wife gets some of the best for us here at home all the time, so planning to have the whole family there for a wonderful cheese tour sometime.
Nice. So 2 points for cheese. Maybe final question, turning also to the ASF Young Leaders Conference. What in one word would you describe your experience at the conference?
I think I'd go with nonstop. We covered so much ground from the sessions, the topics we hit, the physical travel across the country, climbing Mount Riggy, nights at the bar, the whole 9 yards, just nonstop. We packed it in.
I would go with innovative. I learned so much about all things that were innovative about Switzerland, all things that all of our peers were doing. It made for an exceptionally interesting.
Great, thanks. So now we're going to go to the second part, which is some more reflective questions. And I would also invite everyone in the audience, in case you're thinking of any questions that you want to ask our two speakers here, you can also post them in the Q&A chat on the Zoom. It should be at the bottom there of your screen. So maybe going first to, I think, a question to both Mayor Lucas and Sally. If we dig a bit deeper into the ASF Young Leaders Conference, can you please share what were the key learnings you gained from the conference, and maybe also if there was something that surprised you? So maybe I would pass on to Sally.
Yeah, I think I could go in a lot of directions with that question. I think one major learning, something that I maybe hadn't spent as much time thinking about, is that neutrality is complicated. That is something that came up time and time again in our conversations. Neutrality is such a core tenet of Swiss culture, the stereotype around the world. And I think it was really interesting to talk and learn and understand kind of the devil can be in the details of what exactly that means, how that plays out on the world stage. I think there was, a lot of conversation about the invasion in Ukraine, about Israel, about conflict around the world, and understanding both the unique position Switzerland is in and how that relationship with the states and with many other countries around the world are impacted by the definition of neutrality and what that means. You said a surprise. I think one thing that I found surprising, and maybe this makes me sound a little bit ignorant, but the reinsurance market is fascinating. I'm not just sucking up to you, Charlotte, over at Swiss Re, but staying at the Swiss Re Center for dialogue, we were able to do a full day of really interesting conversations, diving deep into different parts of how Swiss Re functions, what they look for, the economic risks, the functional side of what reinsurance looks like. That was an industry I had never learned much about. And that's something that I found surprisingly interesting, and I think leads to a larger point, which is the breadth and depth of the conversations that we had really was exciting and was something that was refreshing to carve out this week of time. I think as an adult, there aren't many times after university where I've been in a position where I've just been able to spend a week to really dive deep with folks who are leaders in all different parts of different industries, different government sectors, private sector, to really just debate and discuss and have those Chatham House rules to really have everyone open up and have honest conversations. So that's a little bit on my kind of key takeaways. Mayor?
I think a few things that I would say. First of all, I share the interest and the knowledge in reinsurance was eye-opening. I plan to, after my government career, I guess send Charlotte my CV to see if in some way I could ever have the qualifications to understand it all. I think I'll look at two things. In American politics, in politics throughout Western Europe, certainly, we spend a lot of time talking just about right-left divisions, and perhaps rightfully so. But in America, of course, Democrats and Republicans, Labor and Tories in the UK. I really enjoyed our opportunity to visit Parliament in Switzerland and to have a true discussion of parties more broadly. In the United States, of course, right, we have a growing, perhaps, socialist faction, but you still don't hear that conversation and that discussion. I think you catch other conversations that relate to issues about how different or distinct the right may be in some ways as well. And so for me, I think that was really opening in many ways that I didn't necessarily expect before. I think one other issue that I would say was particularly intriguing was how much we got to learn about people's lives and their backgrounds and their work, among other things. And so I got to spend lots of time in the evenings with people working on any number of issues. Sorry, I'm in the hospital and lots of people are moving all around me, and it's all fun. But nonetheless, got a chance to work on or learn on what they were working on, other countries they'd been to, why they perhaps were interested in the United States. And so in all of those steps, I think that was incredibly eye-opening. And, we're not necessarily young, although we're young leaders, but it was very interesting to me to learn kind of how people like to have fun, even into the wee hours of the night.
Thanks, Sally, and also Mayor Lucas, and delighted to hear that you both find reinsurance interesting. Maybe also as a bit of background context for those on the call. So usually for the Young Leaders Summit, there's always one company that will host the young leaders for that year. And so last year was Swiss Re, which is the company I work at. And then there we showed the young leaders various aspects of reinsurance, and that can be also very exciting, from natural disasters to all sorts of pandemic risks and other key concerns and risks. Maybe then over to Sally. I think also one other topic or one of the topics that came up at the conference was the next generation. And we focused a lot on how do you develop also the next generation. So what would you say are the similarities or differences that you saw between our two nations in preparing the younger generation for the workplace?
Yeah, great question. I think the innovation in Switzerland is very present in many different aspects of kind of the, obviously the healthcare industry, some of the places we got to visit, Pilates, On Cloud, ETH Zurich, and other stops along our week-long program. I think the innovation in workforce development was something that really rang true as a kind of key part of Swiss institutions and Swiss culture in a way that I didn't expect, and I had a lot to learn. The Swiss apprenticeship programs are a really interesting model, and I think in the U.S., at least I usually, when I think of an alternative to a 2 or 4 year college degree, I think of career and technical education opportunities that kind of exist among specific trades and with pretty clear and specific paths here in the States. The Swiss model, the apprenticeship model, goes a lot deeper than that. Grading, job learning across career paths in many different directions, really having that work and education combination at an early stage in what I would think of as our high school, and really setting these students up for a future career and future successes. So I would say I learned a lot about that from our speakers and our formal discussions. But also really just from, like the mayor was saying, we had a lot of time for conversation and getting to hear from the Swiss young leader participants about their friends, their family members, coworkers, friends who went down the apprenticeship path for so many different types of careers, whether it be, management roles, HR, engineering, logistics, technical trades, as well as a lot of industries and a lot of paths that I wouldn't have thought of as being quite a standard in the States. I think at one point I heard a statistic, and Charlotte, correct me if I'm wrong, but that almost 2/3 of Swiss young people are doing some level of apprenticeship, of combining school and work. And that kind of a statistic is just mind-blowing when you think about what those stats look like here in the States. When you think about the innovation, I think something that sets Switzerland apart in how they're preparing young people for their next roles are kind of the partnership between the private sector, the students, and the Swiss economy, right? It's a win-win-win. Not only are the students making money faster, they're not taking on as much debt or any debt like we do here in the States, but also they're learning these very tactical skills where the companies additionally are getting to train the workforce that they need. They're able to develop these leaders in specific paths, specific skill sets that help them accomplish their goals, plan for the future. So it was really neat to see. And I think, to wrap it up, as an American, not an expert on this issue, it also was really great to hear from our counterparts. The mayor, of course, I'd say, Megan Lukens, who's a former full-time teacher, now state representative out in Colorado. It was really neat to hear about what she's doing in her home state with CareerWise and some other groups that are focused on what it looks like to push a Swiss model in the States and how that works with our institutions, our policy, and how to incentivize that. I think Rachel's working on those issues in Maryland as part of the governor's workforce development board. We had Anna and Molly, who had both worked on the federal side at the Department of Labor. So it was also really neat to hear how that Swiss model is something that, maybe those of us who aren't experts on the topic don't realize is such a point of conversation in so many different areas of our federal and state government and private sector conversations.
Thanks, Sally. And I think that's also a great segue to Mayor Lucas in terms of maybe if you could also share your thoughts on what you think the U.S. as a country can learn from Switzerland. So you shared also, you said before, you learned some personal sides to the Swiss people. But what do you think also the U.S. as a country can learn from Switzerland, besides also, for example, what Sally mentioned on the apprenticeship program?
Well, I will say, first of all, here in the United States, we have a saying that some people have a steel trap memory, and it is obvious that Sally has one, being able to remember not only each person, but each visit we made. I think there are a few important things that we can learn.
So I think we may be lost Mayor Lucas, but I'm sure he's going to be coming back soon. So maybe with that, I think while we wait for Mayor Lucas, maybe also over to you, Sally, a question also, another theme that
Even if
came
we're
up.
at a seminar or
Oh,
a
you're back. Sorry, we
Oh.
lost you, Mayor Lucas. Maybe if you could just start from the beginning in terms of what you think the U.S. can learn from Switzerland.
I will start again. Everyone was incredibly looking intrigued by what it was I had to say. I will say a few things. One, looking actually at something that was more organic from our time together, pedestrianization, the way that school children were actually going to school each day, looking at people who were riding for us, what would be streetcars, buses, and beyond, I think is something that actually we are looking to do in more American cities. Often when you think of the United States, you think of our larger cities, New York, Washington, Boston, and others. But many of the rest of us are actually working on tools of how we can make sure that we're better connecting different parts of our community. And I think that is something important that Americans learned, certainly I did from my time there. Access to actually nature as well being something that's important. Outside of some certain areas, I think understanding that your health, actually your community, the positive treatment of your workforce is something that's vital. So when we were looking again at Swiss Re, although others certainly do it too, having actually good cuisine available to people, we actually saw that in Parliament as well, is something that's very important. If you were to visit, and I know Sally knows as well, if you were to visit the United States Capitol building, there is maybe there's one good place to eat inside. Otherwise, you are in a basement cafeteria getting hamburgers, French fries, and all those sorts of things, right? Actually thinking about employee wellness was something that I found to be incredibly interesting in our discussions with a number of Swiss firms and Swiss companies. I think another thing that I would add to my time there was understanding one's role within the world. And that is something that I think we as Americans often have challenges with, frankly. What I got from a number of our colleagues was an understanding not just of America because they were dealing with Americans, but really any number of countries and issues around them. We happen to be in Switzerland shortly after, of course, new international conflict in the Middle East, certainly ongoing concerns in the Ukraine. And so for us, we were part of this conversation that I think is perhaps different than how Americans tend to think of international politics, which comes to us from a pure funding perspective in most situations, not necessarily from relations with the countries or folks that are engaged in conflicts themselves. And so I took all of those principles from our time there. I think that's something that Americans can learn. And if you think about it, they're the basics to life, right? How do you get around? How do you interact with each other in your own communities? How importantly do you interact with other communities and countries in your world? And how do you see actually importance, not just from those who may border you, but those beyond? And then I think fundamentally, how do you actually take care of your workforce long term? We in the United States are dealing with issues of workforce development, recruitment, and retention. Indeed, we had people on the program in the United States working for the Department of Labor federally, state of Maryland, and others who worked on those issues. We have issues certainly with international affairs and understanding how it relates to American politics. And long term, I think we have issues with how we actually know to get around in our own cities, something I think about in the Midwest all the time. And so those were just a few of the highlights that I thought of with our time together.
Thanks, Mayor Lucas. Yeah, maybe give some ideas also for for your city too. Maybe then linking also to what you said there on the international side. While this conference was a lot about the U.S. and Switzerland, there was one third country that did come up a few times in the conversations or rather debates, and that was China. So maybe question over to Sally, if you have any observations on those discussions or debates and why you think that came up.
Yeah, definitely. To build on what the mayor said, I think, it was a good reminder that the world is a small place. We are all so interconnected. That goes, between our two groups, the American and Swiss, but also so many more. So as we talked about Ukraine and the proximity to Switzerland, as we talked about Israel and the Middle East, but also as we talked about China, I think there was a lot of conversation around what leadership looks like in the world, what America's role is around the globe, the impact of our policies and leadership, and framing in that global debate, but also the role of Switzerland, also the role of the neutral party that is so important in so many conversations, so many hard situations. And I think, there was a lot of conversation about China, how China fits into the narrative as we look back over the last decade of growth, how we look forward to the next decade and beyond of growth. It's interesting for me as an American to hear some of these different Swiss perspectives. It seemed that there was a wide array, which is always creates good discussion. A lot of different thoughts on kind of the economic opportunity, as well as the importance of trade equality, parity in how we think about trade with China, how Switzerland thinks about trade with the EU and others, and kind of those risks and rewards of the growing power and influence of China, what it will mean for both of our nations, and what bonds we have together, and how the world stage is impacted by those. So it was definitely interesting to have some experts on both the American side and the Swiss side, and I think caused a lot of reflection and a lot of conversation that will continue here. I don't think that any solutions were found or any final decisions were made with our group, but it was really interesting conversation and debate about the world stage.
Thanks. And maybe then staying on the theme there of fostering also relations, and I think that's also the ASF is all about fostering also relations between Switzerland and the US. A question over to Mayor Lucas. If you had a magic wand and if you could change or accelerate something to further strengthen the ties and relations between the US and Switzerland, what would that be in your view?
Well, I would love a direct flight to Zurich from my hometown, and so that's question one. The request has been made to Swiss Air. I don't know if I've gotten an affirmative answer yet, but a few different things I think could help us in even stronger relations. I think that the focus that ASF has on business contacts and connections and opening up understanding of Swiss business, particularly even the metrics as it relates to investment or trade partnership importance with the United States, is key. I think it is very easy in domestic politics for us to think of, and you just mentioned China, to think of somewhat repeat players, or frankly, countries with whom perhaps we have more political conflict, as ones that are perhaps more vital in our daily political economy discourse. And I don't necessarily find that to be the case, particularly after my time in Switzerland. So I think that's the one magic wand type of thing, ongoing business relations and actually building that understanding broadly for the United States. I think another thing that's actually important that might be a bit unique and unpredictable, but that's why you're all here right now, is I think we all certainly, whether it be Davos or beyond, understand Switzerland's existence as important in the world economy. I think, and I think about this, I'm a politician after all, the importance of our trade with Switzerland to the everyday American. It is not just, right, a conversation or a country that is important to elites in the United States, in Switzerland or the United States. It's actually a relationship that is vital to all of us, right? We had a discussion on industries that have an impact, I would think, Swiss companies that have an impact on Americans, American hospitals, American businesses, American cities and communities, ranging from some of our wealthiest to some who are not. And so I think that is something that is important for us to understand. And I think importantly, all of us who are alums of the Young Leaders Program, something that's important for us to share long term. While it can seem like Switzerland is perhaps the 3 C's or skiing, something that not every American does, and certainly this American doesn't do well, right? It is also a place that's a vital trade partner that's working in things from sneakers to lending to so many other areas. So vital for all of us with that. The final point will be during our time with ETH, I also wanted to take back home, I think, this startup and the educational relationship between startups and all that we can do to support the fact that the real way that we grow dynamism in our countries, particularly as birth rates if not decline, but certainly stagnate in our nations, both of them, is to see how we actually can continue to attract the most creative and innovative people in the world. That usually is done by some of our top universities. There was discussion on MIT and ETH. There are any number of other institutions. I think if I had my real magic wand opportunity, I would say, how do I build even more academic partnerships? How do I bring in more thinkers, thought leaders, innovators that are Swiss and beyond right into the United States? And how, from a program like this, can we build up more of that foundation long term?
Great. Thanks. Yeah, and maybe also for those on the call, I would definitely agree with you also, Mayor Lucas. Even for me as a Swiss, I learned so much because the whole week was also about visiting different companies, learning about different sectors, and also seeing how integrated they are in the broader world. And it was absolutely fascinating seeing also industries like also the Pilatus aircrafts to also like the On shoes. We learned a lot there. So I'm going to slowly wrap up now. So also just a reminder, in case any of you have any questions, you can press the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. And with that, I'm going to just ask a final, maybe closing remarks. First off, maybe to Sally, if you could maybe just share now how you're continuing on with the Young Leader ASF vibes after the conference last November. So how are you staying connected with other young leaders, and how are you keeping the community going?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm very grateful for the week in November that ASF provided and all the sponsors made possible. It was quite an amazing opportunity. And I feel like with that opportunity comes some responsibility to stay engaged, stay in touch. I think, events like this are obviously a great way virtually to touch base, to check in and continue these conversations. I wish I could pop over to Switzerland a little bit more easily. Like the mayor said, would love to make that a more constant thing in my life. But for now, we do have a few young leaders around DC, which is really nice. And actually, just last week, I got to join a few young leaders at the ambassador's residence. And Mayor Lucas, I apologize because DC got here a little faster than Kansas City, but we were celebrating the Swiss direct flight from Zurich to Dulles. So that was a lot of fun. Marcellus was there, one of our young leaders who works at the embassy. I got to see him MC and kind of do his thing there. He gave us a tour of the residence and the grounds of the embassy. It was just a lot of fun to reconnect. And I know there's more DC programming coming soon. I was not able to make it to New York in March, but I saw our class had some good selfies coming from the gala dinner that happened a few weeks ago. And then at the beginning of this presentation, I know the Leadership Summit was brought up. That was back at the Center for Global Dialogue in Switzerland just last week. And I was very jealous to see some more selfies of our class at the bar back in action all together. So, I'm really looking forward to staying in touch. Mayor, as you know, I have some family in Kansas City now, so I have no excuse not to come visit you. And I'm really looking forward to my tour of the city when I do. And I think there are a lot of great ways for all of us to stay connected, whether it's in the group chat or events like these or travel down the line. So feeling very grateful to have been a part of this network and have all of these new friends and folks to get to continue conversation with.
Thanks, Sally. Any other concluding remarks from you, Mayor Lucas?
It is rare in life when you are, let's say, almost mid-career, that you have a chance to meet a new professional network, right? That's usually the province of, for us, university, maybe early career type work. And as Sally just noted, we have the opportunity to visit not just with the dozens in our program, but many more beyond. At each firm with which we had conversations, parliamentarians, people actually on the streets and in restaurants and in bars as well. That was something that I think is unique for me in life. As a public servant, right, sometimes things come at you that are surprising. I have confronted very great and exciting moments here in the United States. My team won an NFL football championship, which is a great deal. We unfortunately had a mass shooting incident sometime after, and many people from the program not only reached out but offered their assistance from their firms, their organizations, people on a different political side of the aisle, and that was something that was truly special. As I had noted before, and sorry for some of the confusion throughout our conversation, I find myself in a hospital with my son who broke his arm yesterday. And in some ways, if I were trying to tie everything together, as we're wont to do sometimes in public service, this kind of speaks to what this program is. It isn't just one time where we get together and talk about big, fancy official things, but it's where you build lasting relationships. Because true relationships are built on camaraderie, friendship, understanding of one's background, knowing more about Charlotte and Sally than just what I can find on their CVs. And to me, I think this is what this program is about, really for the United States and Switzerland as well. It isn't just us saying that we have foreign ministries that can speak to each other and figure everything out, and so why would we engage? It's instead saying that we have two very special nations that are represented by businesses and people and elected officials that really run the gamut of so many things that make it special to be Swiss or American. And so for me, this program helped build that even more than I think I've had in any other international engagement, and I've been blessed to have a few. But it also, frankly, allowed me to make a good number of friends and contacts that I hope last a lifetime. So in addition to finding each other through different social media or communications tools, I think that we'll continue to find each other through business tools as well. And to me, there is in many ways nothing more special. So while I may not be able to get back to, well, I'll get back to Zurich soon. Washington, I can skip. But, well, we may not be together all the time. I think that our relationships will continue to grow even stronger.
Thanks. No, and I fully echo that. I think at the end of the day, it's the network, the relationships. These are so precious and valuable because at the end of the day, it's all about people. And you just have a completely different conversation. I can also just imagine in the future, also in the business context, if you actually know someone in one company or one area, you just have a whole other conversation on that way. So with that, we've now reached the end, and I'm just looking through the Q&A, and I see I have one question, which is for Mayor Lucas. You touched a bit upon this actually before on the different multiple party system that you see there in Switzerland. So both Switzerland and the U.S., they are federalist systems, yet there are also these differences. And there was a day where we had to go to Bern and we watched a political debate there. Could you maybe just share some further thoughts and observations of that multi-party democratic system in Switzerland?
Well, I know that we stay nonpartisan and we allow all open conversations, but I will talk to you about seeing this through a prism of American politics. There will be a presidential election this year in the United States. Many of you are probably familiar. Much of the discussion in American rhetoric, and I say this with respect to both gentlemen who seem to be nominees for their parties, is that people often say, how do we have more options? How do we have more discussion? We don't want the discussion to just be the clear dichotomy that we seem to get in American politics rather regularly. And that's not just a comment on the 24 and 2020 elections, but even years before. And so to me, right, many Americans I spoke to while we were in Switzerland, found it actually a welcome discussion to be able to have very different approaches to how we can address an issue that came up was immigration, for example. Right? So it wasn't as simple as build a wall or not. It wasn't necessarily as simple as perhaps the sloganeering that you get necessarily in American politics and in the very kind of simplified system of having your two choices. But instead, we got to see, I believe in that situation, 5 choices, and sometimes they were a bit more fluid than that, options in terms of how we can address issues. And so I think that was something that was very welcoming for people. What could that mean for America going forward? Well, I actually do think that those of us who were in the program kind of saw that, wait a second, in the political world of the United States, we actually do have those prisms of thought. However, they don't necessarily rise to electoral success in a presidential election, and sometimes not even into certain caucuses in the United States House or Senate. But what I think I would want to take from it is to say that, well, there are people and thinkers that are thinking about the very real and same challenges we are, right? That there were, and I actually found the socialist discussion on immigration in some ways probably aligns with my politics somewhat. This intriguing approach to how you want to be welcoming, right? All those sorts of things. Is there a place for that in American political discourse where we don't really have it now? I think that learning from Switzerland, that there needs to be a forum for all ideas, even if that doesn't mean victory necessarily, is something that I'd like to see us take in more American political systems long term. And I think that is something that, frankly, you will see happen in American politics. So, Charlotte, I would like you to know, and everyone listening, that you all likely planted the seeds for even more growth in, I won't say American political division, because Lord knows we have enough, but actually perhaps unifying forces in discussion that say, right, we want to make sure that we are heard in a way that perhaps our traditional two-party system isn't allowing right now.
Thanks. So I think that wraps up. I don't see any other questions here. So with that, I would say a big thank you to Sally and also Mayor Lucas for being here with us today. And I enjoyed these conversations and just brings me back to our fabulous week in November. And I would just say for all of those of you on the audience here, I would invite you to follow the ASF's LinkedIn page, where you're also actually going to see some recaps to last week's inaugural leadership summit. That are being posted throughout this week. Maybe just a bit my reflections on that. So we talked now today about the Young Leaders Conference, but last week we had a wider leadership conference for the ASF. And this was, I thought, also, again, absolutely fabulous for three key reasons. Number one, I would say just the breadth of the topic. So similar to the Young Leaders Conference, it was extremely content rich, and we explored a variety of opportunities and also challenges in U.S. and Swiss relationships. So, for example, discussing economic policy making, the global implications of the U.S. election, the energy transition and energy security, cybersecurity, and also the interplay of health or public health policy with global security. But I think the second reason I really liked it was very thought-provoking. There was a lot of focus on more discussing debate. And then the final thing was also, again, it was a very interesting network of people present there, and you already start to expand further the network, like what also Mayor Lucas mentioned previously. It's all about people and building relationships that I enjoy about the ASF conference. So I would encourage all of you to get involved in one way or the other, be it through applying potentially to be a future young leader or joining the annual, hopefully it will turn annual ASF Leadership Summit for all participants. And of course, over the course of the year, there's also going to be some alumni events. We've got a newly established alumni committee at the ASF, which is also going to activate local communities. So for example, the New York gathering there, which Sally mentioned, but also in Switzerland, we had a alumni reunion where we had cheese, so not chocolate, for dinner. So we had a fondue dinner back in January, which was great to also see many familiar faces. And I'm sure there will be also many other such events. So just stay tuned, check out the LinkedIn page. You can also sign up to the email distribution list where you get the weekly newsletter. And with that, I think, yeah, again, big thank you to Mayor Lucas and also Sally for joining, and hopefully see you in the not too distant future. Bye.
Thank you so much, Charlotte.
Bye-bye now. Thank you.